Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Today, 7 first-degree murder charges against the suspected gunman in that 4th of July parade shooting as new details emerge about his past. Some welcome news for people who fly. New technologies are on the way that can make it easier to get through security checks while also keeping America safe. She's a rock star among many conservatives and could be a presidential candidate. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem tells CBN News what led her to run for public office. And the latest film from the biggest animated franchise in history. CBN Studio 5 brings you a look at Minions: The Rise of Gru.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin with the stunning new details about the suspected gunman in that 4th of July parade attack in Highland Park, Illinois Monday, including warning signs about him from the past. Authorities flagged him as a clear and present danger in 2019. Charlene Aaron has the story.
Officials say Robert Crimo III spent weeks planning the deadly attack.
We do believe Crimo pre-planned this attack for several weeks.
Police say he dressed in women's clothing to conceal his facial tattoos and his identity to help him escape.
He walked to his mother's home, who lived in the area, and he blended right in with everybody else as they were running around, almost as he was an innocent spectator as well.
The 21-year-old now charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder.
These are just the first of many charges that will be filed against Mr. Crimo.
Crimo opened fire at a 4th of July parade in Highland Park, a suburb 30 miles north of downtown Chicago. Police say he used a ladder to climb to the roof of a building, firing off 70 rounds, wounding 40 and killing 6. A 7th victim died at the hospital Tuesday. The grieving community remembering the lives lost. Kevin and Irina McCarthy had taken their young son into town for the annual 4th of July parade. The child was found under his father's body.
How do you tell an 18-month-old boy that mommy and daddy are in heaven now? There are no words.
Jackie Sundheim was a teacher at her local synagogue. 78-year-old Nicholas Toledo was a dual citizen of the U.S. and Mexico. Officials say the suspect was known to police. In April of 2019, officers were called to his home after he attempted suicide. The matter then handled by mental health professionals. 5 months later, police were called again after he threatened to kill his family.
A family member reported that Crimo said he was going to kill everyone, and Crimo had a collection of knives. The police removed 16 knives, a dagger, and a sword from Crimo's home.
Officials say he also posted a series of disturbing and violent posts and videos on social media. One post reportedly included a route to the July 4th parade. Still, the suspect was able to purchase at least 5 firearms, including the rifle used in the attack. Some say the state's red flag laws could have prevented the mass shooting. Vice President Kamala Harris renewing calls for an assault weapons ban.
We need to end this horror. We need to stop this violence. And we must protect our communities from the terror of gun violence.
Representative Adam Kinzinger, whose district is not far from Highland Park, told CBN News the problem is deeper than guns.
We have a problem in this country with the heart, and there can be no doubt about that. The fact that somebody would take any weapon, whether it's an AR-15, a car, poison, anything, and take somebody's life. It's what happens, I guess, when you turn away from values, you turn away from God.
Meanwhile, police are still searching for a motive in the shooting. The suspect is set to be arraigned Wednesday. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
In other news, canceled flights and delays at airports have frustrated many travelers this summer, mainly due to difficulties with airlines, although also partly because of security checks. But while those checks can slow down travelers trying to make their flights, advances in technology could help the Transportation Security Administration change that, all while increasing national security. Caitlin Burke has this look at what's being called the TSA of the future.
The terror attacks of September 11th meant an immediate change in air travel, but enhanced security measures evolved over time.
Unfortunately, there's continued to have events that happen. You had the underwear bomber, which changed the way we looked at people screening, and all of a sudden body scanners became the norm. You had the shoe bomber. So there's all these events that took place And so there's a lot of a reactive approach to it.
By being proactive, however, the TSA and its partners have worked to stay ahead of potential threats.
We need to continuously be innovative, and we need to continuously come up with new methods of improving security. We have to keep coming up with new methods of doing it because our adversaries are also continuously looking at new ways to defeat what they know we have.
Kannan Krishnaswamy works at the U.S. Department of Energy's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. One of its missions is national security, and researchers are behind many of the screening technology in airports today.
The portals that you go through with your hands above your head, that came out of the laboratory. In fact, we lovingly at the laboratory, we call this the PNNL salute.
Those scanners use millimeter wave technology.
That technology, the basic technology and the basic invention came out in the 1990s. We've had that system or that technology available since the 1990s. Now, there was no real need for commercial deployment or deployment in the airports because airport security at that time was very different.
Then 9/11 catapulted millimeter wave technology to the forefront of national security.
So that's the older generation of the technology that is currently being sold even today at the airports.
And now a second-generation millimeter wave system is close to being deployed.
The way HexWave works is, first of all, it's a walk-through portal, and it uses radio frequency and real-time 3D video rate imaging so we can determine if an individual has a threat on their body. We've trained it to ignore some of the common benign objects, so you won't have to divest. So your phone, your keys, your belt, wallet, watches, glass cases.
Bill Frayne, the CEO of Liberty Defense, which developed HexWave, says the key differentiator between it and existing technologies is the ability to detect non-metallic threats.
And as you know, the people trying to do and defeat the system to do harm, they're being more creative. They're using 3D plastic guns. They're using liquid explosives.
Liberty has also licensed a shoe scanning technology from PNNL that can be used inside the HexWave or existing body scanners.
Imagine if you didn't have to take your shoes off at the airport. Talk about, passenger experience. That's probably top of the list when we talk to people who are going through the airports.
While this scanning tech is a few years away, the HexWave system will soon be deployed to screen aviation workers who access secure areas of airports. After that, the goal is for it to be used at all security checkpoints, allowing travelers to pass through without breaking stride.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Danish evangelist Torben Søndergaard says he's being held by Immigration and Customs Enforcement for suspicion of smuggling weapons into the U.S. Søndergaard sought asylum in the U.S. after fleeing Denmark 3 years ago. He wrote on his Facebook page that he was invited to a meeting with Homeland Security to talk about his asylum case. Then he says he was suddenly told the real reason he was there was because they had been notified he was smuggling weapons from Mexico to the U.S. He was shocked and says he never had anything to do with smuggling weapons. You can read the full story, including how God used him while in detention, on CBNNews.com. Coming up, from roping cattle to reining in government. Meet the Heartland governor who's comfortable doing both. South Dakota's Kristi Noem tells us how a farming accident prompted her to run for office and how she's bringing a few lessons learned on the ranch into the governor's mansion. Welcome back to Newswatch. In recent years, South Dakota's governor has emerged as a political rock star in conservative circles. Kristi Noem credits her success to lessons she learned from her father growing up on the family farm. She talks about it all in her book, Not My First Rodeo, Lessons from the Heartland. CBN's Wendy Griffith brings us this story from South Dakota.
South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem steps out looking like the picture-perfect cowgirl. But this isn't a costume. This is who she is.
We live on the ranch, the one that my dad bought when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I love to chase cows and sit in tree stands hunting. So, for me to be in D.C., in a city, at receptions and dinners and in crowded House floors voting was a challenge.
In her new book, Not My First Rodeo, Lessons from the Heartland, Noem dives into her childhood, working on the family farm, and going to church with her parents and siblings whenever the doors were open.
I always thought, you know, you read scripture, you think, gosh, God loves farmers more than anybody else. You know, he loves ranchers more than everybody else. I mean, he's talking about sowing and reaping all the time, and your barns are overflowing and cattle on 1,000 hills. And so, you know, for heaven's sakes, you just assume that this way of life is something that God would want everybody to be able to live.
Then the unimaginable happened. At just 49 years old, Kristi's father, Ron, died in a tragic farm accident while she was away at college.
When Dad passed away, it was devastating for our entire family. For me in particular, he was my best friend. You know, he was the person I admired the most, the one who I cared the most what he thought of me, and had planned my entire life just to grow up and to work with him and be in business with him. So when he died, I couldn't even imagine what the next day would look like.
By now, Noem was married to her husband, Brian, and they were 8 months pregnant with their first daughter. Noem left college to go home and keep the farm going.
So I probably wasn't the best mother at that time because all I knew to do was what my dad would have done, and that was work and take care of business. But thankfully, we had a strong family, and my mom was incredible in helping to take care of Cassidy and teach me how to be a good mom, too.
Noem says lessons learned from her dad are still with her today, especially,
Kristi, we don't complain about things, we fix them.
And it was those words that compelled her to enter politics and try to fix what she considered the most unfair tax that nearly bankrupted her family's farm after her father passed, the so-called death tax.
It took me 10 years to pay off those taxes, and it made me angry. So I just started showing up at meetings, and I felt that if I was upset by this law that was on the books, then I needed to do something about it.
After several years in South Dakota's state legislature, Noem felt God nudging her toward Washington. She won a seat in Congress and championed an issue near and dear to her, getting the Farm Bill passed.
And yes, I was very bold and got into some tough fights with the leadership in the House, national leaders that had never been challenged before. And they did not react well. But I would say that at the end of the day, we got it done.
Noem calls her best decision the one she made to come back home to South Dakota.
I think that being governor fits my personality better. I'm very much a decision maker. I'd run my own businesses for many, many years.
Her leadership during the pandemic thrust her into the national spotlight, especially her refusal to enforce federal mask mandates and shut down business.
Well, I really felt like during the pandemic, we saw the best of South Dakota. We saw people that had faith in each other, faith in God, and they really partnered in a way that was pretty inspiring for the rest of the country to watch.
Today, she and Lieutenant Governor Larry Roden, a third-generation cattle rancher, are running the show, with farming, cattle ranching, and the nation's food supply at the top of their priority list.
I just have recognized for many, many years that the country that feeds itself controls its own future. But if we start importing food from another country, then they control us. And we are getting dangerously close to that. And we're seeing supply chain issues.
Noem also recently signed legislation making girls' sports solely for biological females. And as of this June, no abortions are being performed in South Dakota.
When I ran for governor, I told the entire country I wanted to be the most pro-life governor in the country that we've ever had. And we're very proud of the fact that today we cherish our children in South Dakota.
But it hasn't been all wins for Noem. Her attempts to forge new relationships with South Dakota's Native American Indians were not well received.
There's a lot of healing that needs to happen there. And I talk a little bit in my book about some of the roadblocks that I've run into when it comes to the tribal council.
Although she's running for another term as governor, conservatives inspired by her strong leadership style have urged a run for the White House.
I don't have any plans to do that. I very much am looking forward to hopefully serving the people of South Dakota another 4 years. I hope they'll trust me to do that. I've also known that we'll see what God has planned, too, because he likes to surprise me once in a while.
Do you ever still feel like that little girl on the ranch?
I feel like that every day. Yes, I do. I find incredible joy from the same things that I did when I was a little girl. There's nothing better to me than a horse. I love chasing cows. So everything that I loved then, I still love. I just don't get to do it as often.
One thing she promised herself when her dad died was that she would live her life to make him proud.
I don't know. You know, that's a hard thing to judge. I think he'd be proud. But I know I can do better.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Pierre, South Dakota.
Governor Kristi Noem's new book, Not My First Rodeo, Lessons from the Heartland, is available wherever books are sold. Still ahead, it's the #1 film in America, Minions, The Rise of Gru. And we'll bring you a look at this animated film about a 12-year-old boy who wants to become the world's greatest supervillain. It's right after this. Thanks for staying with Newswatch. Here's a movie about the story of a 12-year-old's dream to become the world's greatest supervillain. It's Minions, The Rise of Gru, and we have a look at the film from CBN's Studio 5.
Hello? Everybody here for the interview? Me too. What do you drive? I got a jet bike.
They're ready to see you, Mr. Gru.
Minions, The Rise of Gru has to do with a young Gru who is trying to assert his dominance as one of the up-and-coming villains.
Distinguished villains, my name is Gru.
And he has an interview with the Vicious Six, who are the main villains of the day.
Hey, I've got the image to uphold here.
You seriously think a puny little child can be a villain?
Yes, I am pretty despicable. You don't want to cross me?
Come back when you've done something evil to impress me.
They deny him, so in order to show them that he is worth his salt, he steals this very important gem.
There's that little thief! Go, go, go!
Otto, take the stone back to the lair. I'll distract them.
Gru wants to be a villain, but like a true villain is somebody who is ultimately not a very good person. And I think at his core, Gru is a very good person.
Come on, let's go tell the troops the good news. This is the biggest day of my life. This kid just stole something from the worst villains in the world.
And it's interesting to see sort of the genesis of like what, you know, where he started and what he ultimately turned into.
Watch out, the world. Here comes Gru! All I need is Otto. Where is Otto?
All minions are eager, but there is a very high eagerness quotient for Otto. And everything is done with the best of intentions and with the worst of results.
Otto, where's the stone?
Ooh, big Astoria.
Everyone has an Otto in their life. And as much as an Otto in your life screws up, you can't help but love Otto.
Oh no! La partida! La bola! Basta el amico! Non le posso stoppare! Baciu! La ghetta! Ah! Topissimo, no?
Did you just trade my future for a pet rock?
The first Despicable Me picks up, and Gru is pretty, you know, he's kind of in his own world. He's living a very solitary life, built up a lot of literal and figurative walls around himself. And little Gru hasn't built that up around him yet. He's pretty much available to the world.
Good night.
Yes, good night.
Good night!
No!
There's a little bit of a purity to that character.
There are a lot of other villains in the world, but I am going to be a super villain.
From top to bottom, everyone involved with these movies is just having fun and trying to make something that's enjoyable and and ultimately kind.
I'm not. All right. I'm not Minnie. Please stop calling me that.
Minions: The Rise of Gru is part of the biggest animated franchise in history. You can catch this summer hit right now in theaters. You can also catch Studio 5 tonight at 8:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel, or you can watch it on the CBN News app. Coming up, it's been said it's never too late for love. We're going to show you a couple who's proving that true when we come back. Stay with us. Finally today, it's never too late for love, and for the couple you're about to meet, their burgeoning affection is proof. Not too long ago, love seemed elusive for the two lovebirds, both pushing 80 years old, after each lost their respective spouses after 52 years of marriage. Zercher and Lucinda Nestor served as caregivers for spouses from their first marriages, both of whom died after painful battles with cancer. But the Wooster, Ohio couple, who knew each other decades prior before reconnecting as widows, held their wedding Saturday. It's a story years in the making for Lucinda, who said after her husband Jim passed away, quote, "I thought my life was over." After finding love so late in life a second time around with her new fiancé Tom, and now her husband, Nestor says, "I really do believe that God is looking out for us." He most definitely is. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen, and you can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.